What is up, everybody? It is Monday, and unfortunately, we're sitting here after a loss to the Cleveland Browns. It got ugly late, and unfortunately, the Packers are now sitting at 2-1. And I think just looking at what happened the past 2 weeks, after the Packers make one of the biggest NFL trades there's been in a very long time for Micah Parsons, and then you start off like they did against both the Lions in week 1 and then the Commanders in week 2, it really felt like, this was a team that was picking up steam, and it felt like the Packers should have beaten the Browns. And going into the game, I talked about it, in the prediction video, that we knew the Browns had a very, very good defense, and the Packers would have a good test there in the Browns' defensive line, and that was definitely the case. But I just sort of assumed that because the Packers' defense is so dominant, and because the Packers' offense had been pretty solid the first couple weeks, I thought it would be enough to win the game, and I was wrong on that one. The Packers offense did not do enough to win the game. They were the sole reason, as well as the special teams, that they lost that game. But I want to focus on one of my biggest concerns, what I do think is a major problem for this Packers team. And sitting at this point in the season, we are now only 3 weeks in. And so there's no doubt things drastically change from week 3 of the NFL season to week 17, week 18, as you enter the playoffs. But seeing the offensive line performance yesterday does have me concerned, just because come playoff time, you're going to face defenses that have very, very solid defensive lines. And it may be the case that the Browns do have the best defensive line in football. I mean, Myles Garrett was dominating, Mason Graham in the interior. They just totally dominated the Packers' offensive line. And I came across this interesting stat this morning. I was reading an article on ESPN from Rob Demovsky, Packers ESPN reporter. He shared this interesting stat. He said this: Love was pressured on 13 of his 31 dropbacks. That 42% pressure rate was the highest he has faced in a game in his career, according to ESPN research. So that was the worst offensive line performance that the Packers have had with Jordan Love as the quarterback anytime that he has started a game in his career. And so that's not something you want to see, especially for a team that I do think has a chance to go on a deep playoff run and make it to a Super Bowl. I predicted this team to beat the Bills in the Super Bowl. That's my prediction here, because I do think that Micah Parsons being traded to Green Bay totally shifted things, and one loss isn't going to make me give up on this team, because some of the best teams in the NFL, we see them struggle and have bad games from time to time. But the thing is, when you do have these bad games, you have to solve some of these issues. And when we do look at the offensive line, there is some reason for hope that things can change. One of the main reasons being that Zach Tom, who the Packers paid a lot before the season, getting his 4-year, $88 million contract, $22 million per year. It looked like before the game that the Packers' best 5 offensive linemen, the guys who they had, planned on being their 5 starters for the most part, looked like they were all going to be healthy. Aaron Banks was back. Zach Tom was back. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, awesome. We have the full crew here to hopefully contain a very, very good Browns defensive line. And then after one play, Zach Tom goes down. And so at that point, it's like, oh man, one of our best probably our best tackle, probably our best offensive lineman at this point. You could argue about Elton Jenkins, even though he played, the whole line played poorly yesterday. But he goes down, and then Aaron Banks plays, and then he only ends up playing in the first half. And so then you immediately lose 2 of your better offensive linemen. And so there's no doubt that was a factor in this game as well. But it's not like just the backups who came in were struggling. Were they struggling? Yes. Jordan Morgan struggled in a big way yesterday. He played some left guard and some right tackle. Anthony Belton came in and played some right tackle as well. And Belton had played really good in the week before, playing 50 snaps at right tackle. He allowed 0 pressures in the game last week, so he played really well. Packers' second-round pick. And then he played 31 snaps this game at right tackle with Zach Tom going down and 4 at left tackle. He allowed 3 pressures and 3 hurries, so not great. And then Jordan Morgan, he had played 68 snaps at left guard last week. He played 35 at left guard this week and 30 at right tackle this week. And so both of those guys struggled in a big way. And I mean, honestly, this entire line struggled. Looking at the sacks allowed, this is per PFF. Elton Jenkins allowed 2. Sean Ryan allowed 1. Jordan Morgan allowed 1. Rasheed Walker allowed 1. And Aaron Banks allowed 1. So the struggles was sort of balanced along the entire offensive line. So on the one hand, if it had just been, let's say, Jordan Morgan, Anthony Belton, you think to yourself, okay, let's hope the Packers' offensive line can stay healthy because their depth may be a potential concern. But when you see Jenkins struggling, when you see Rasheed Walker struggling, it does make you a little bit concerned. And for the first 2 weeks, this Packers offensive line played really well, and Jordan Love had a ton of time. You shift to this week, Jordan Love had no time back there in the pocket, and the Browns were, playing a ton of man coverage. They were getting pressure so fast, and Matt LaFleur talked about this after the game, that there just wasn't enough time for those, deep routes to develop. And so where the Packers had really excelled in the first 2 weeks, picking teams apart deep, finding guys deep, Jordan Love had I think he actually did have the highest average depth of target in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. He wasn't able to do that in this game because of how quickly the Browns defensive line was getting to the quarterback. And so obviously the Packers offensive line needs to play better in the future. And I think that sometimes, units have bad games. And I think that's what we have to hope is the case here, that they just had a bad game and that they're going to get things ironed out. And hopefully whenever Zach Tom comes back, whenever that is, he should not be rushed back. I think now, after coming back for one snap, you'd assume the Packers may be a little more patient because it's better right now if he had to sit out a couple games, which I don't know. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. It's probably better now to allow him to sit so that he's healthy in the more important parts later in the season and coming in to the playoffs. And so I think for me, seeing the Packers offensive line, it's like, okay, played good the first couple weeks, played poorly this week. Let's hope that this isn't a sign of things to come, because the Packers aren't going to be playing a lot of defensive lines that are this talented. But when you have teams like the Eagles, other teams around the NFL, come playoff time, you have to be able to give Jordan Love time. And so now looking at this Packers team sitting at 2-1, the defense played an incredible game. They honestly couldn't have played much better. They played perfect nearly the whole game. And if it weren't for a very, very bad Jordan Love interception and for a blocked field goal, the Packers should have won that game. And so defensively, there's no concerns. It's the offense that is the concern. And so for me, when I looked at this team before the season, before the Packers made the trade for Micah Parsons, one of the things I was looking at that I was wondering if the Packers could, one area where they needed to basically be better, to be able to make a deep playoff run was Jordan Love playing consistent football, because we had seen him for a long stretch, the regular season near the end, was playing really clean football, wasn't throwing any interceptions, and then he goes in against the Eagles and throws 3 picks in that game. And so when you have that happen there, you have the year prior against the 49ers in the playoffs, you have the interceptions happen there as well. You think to yourself, okay, this Packers team is very good. They were very good in the regular season last year. What they need to do is be consistent. Jordan Love needs to be consistent come playoff time. And then to have him throw that pick at the time that he threw it yesterday in a situation where you can't have a mistake like that, Jordan Love makes that mistake. And so it does make you a little bit concerned. Now, of course, quarterbacks are going to have mistakes. They're going to throw interceptions. But it is unfortunate that in a very crucial moment, in a moment where you just need to play clean football because of how good the defense had played, Jordan Love makes a mistake there. So that's not something you want to see. And I did think with the Packers bringing Micah Parsons in, Jordan Love didn't need to be quite as efficient, because if the defense is playing that good, you can get away with a few more mistakes on the offense. But when you have a defense like the Browns playing as good as they did against the Packers offense, when it comes down to a one possession game, that's where it comes down to Jordan Love playing clean and consistent football. And unfortunately, he was unable to do that. So hopefully when the playoffs come, and I assume the Packers will make the playoffs, that I believe they will, even at this point, even though this was a very ugly loss, Jordan Love will have to play clean football, because as we see, this offense, if they come up against some very, very good defenses, they may struggle. So hopefully this is something that can be cleaned up. Anytime something like this happens, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that this offensive line can't bounce back. I think they can. They have a lot of talent, and they played really good the first 2 weeks. They just have to clean up some of these issues. If you'd like more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below. But I appreciate you guys watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time.